Hello and welcome to the Rabid Atheist. Hold on, I gotta make a slight adjustment. There we go. Just welcome to the Rabid Atheist. I'm your host Ed Raby. Today is a live stream. I'm doing some Rabyd Reflections here. I'm a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. So welcome to my channel. Today I want to. My first thing on the agenda is when I was talking about Christianity reducing human empathy. And I know that that sounds like a very bold claim, except I see it every day on this channel all the time. Um, and I want to comment upon it. Yeah, here he is. Yeah. um, hey, guys. What sparked this, and I'm going to do some other things today. I got to revisit the 2 or 3 witnesses discussion because of something somebody said in the comments. I also want to take a look pre-debate, the Harris-Trump debate a little bit, though I find some of the polling very interesting among Christians. There's one Christian group that's become very interesting as far as polling. So, and then there's also dealing with some other comments that are more general. I want to do that too. But I want to start off here with this empathy question. And I'm going to make the claim that at least I know for a fact that Christianity reduces empathy because of its doctrines and the way people perceive it. One of the things I learned after I deconverted was how religion reinforces the ego, like it reinforces your belief about yourself. And a lot of people view that as a positive, but there is one definite negative there, which is the fact that people begin to think much more highly of them than themselves. Okay, they begin to think about themselves as being better than others. It also kind of reinforces tribalism, but I want to deal with this ego shift. Because on Wednesday, the Bible study dropped where I was talking about Joshua's conquest in Joshua 10, where he conquers the southern cities, and making the note that Joshua did as he was commanded to do. God commanded him to completely wipe these people out, destroy everything. And I left the scenario in there of a Jewish soldier busts down the door of one of these cities, finds a pregnant woman, an old man, and 2 little kids. And you don't know the words, right? Okay. But according to the command of God at that point, he has to kill everybody in that room. Okay. The command of God is very specific. Kill everybody in that room. They are not human to you anymore. And once that was released on Wednesday, some of the theist comments I got were kind of okay, apologetic, but there was a couple from a single commenter, I'm not going to name them, that got me angry and got me going a little bit. I have to tell you that I'm angry. But one of them started out like this, and I was reading the comment for the first time, and I couldn't get past the first line. I want you to hear this, okay? I want everybody to hear this line, so pay attention. In responding to all these people being human and being killed, this commenter makes this line. Those people were human, but they had to go to advance the plan of salvation, which was God's objective. How far are we getting here before you get mad? They had to go to advance the plan of salvation, which is God's objective. I don't know of a statement that could encapsulate the diminishing of human empathy, of having empathy towards other human beings than that one. That the plan of salvation that God has is so important that they had no value other than that they were in the way and God had to get them out of the way. That's it. And I don't know what to do with that. Okay. I haven't responded to this comment because I'm trying to be as objective as possible. I really do work at that on this channel. But how do you respond to somebody whose human empathy has dropped to the level where human beings are nothing more than in the way of God's plan? And it doesn't really speak well of God's plan, does it? If God just has societies grow up, you know, just so he can eliminate them as part of his plan. They're in the way of his plan. I don't get it. I don't understand how you cannot see how your empathy has been reduced because of this. And it's the reinforcement of the ego of, the comment doesn't get any better. And it ends with the Jews are held accountable for this, for everything, because they were God's chosen people. Okay. So on the one hand, you have God has this plan of salvation that requires some of the people that he allows to grow up to be destroyed and eliminated altogether, right? And then on the other hand, you have this idea of people being God's chosen people. What an inflator of people's ego. That you're part of a plan that human beings are incidental to. Okay? Well, salvation for who, if not humanity? So in order for God to save humanity, some people are just cannon fodder for that. And on the flip side, we have this ego boosting thing that we're God's chosen. In this particular case, with Joshua, the Israelite people are God's chosen people, so they get to kill other people because they're in the way. And you accept that answer. And this is the change that's come about in me. And I'm so glad that I now get angry at this stuff in certain respects, because I would have given that answer when I was a Christian. I would have given something very similar to that as a Protestant Christian, that, well, they disobeyed God's law, so therefore they became out of God's plan, and so they had to be eliminated. And it's this inflation of the ego that I was, chosen of God. I mean, it starts, people want to talk about indoctrination. I remember, I now look at some of the things I did for Christian education, as particularly with children, like telling kids, "Oh, you're a king's kid," or you're this, this great thing. You're part of God's great plan of salvation now. And I now realize how much that stokes the ego about people. Just, yeah, I mean, just following orders, just doing what they're supposed to do. Okay. And people are incidental to that. And you somehow in your mentality as a Christian, you begin to diminish this ego that you have about valuing people, and you increase the ego about yourself. And so those people are no longer worth anything. They have less value. Okay. And to top it all off later on, okay, the same person, same video about Joshua's conquest, wants to talk to me about tithing. The reason why they destroyed everything is the basic tenor of this comment. God had the Israelites kill everything, including the animals. Okay, because God needed to make sure that he got his cut. Human beings are in the way, and we got to make sure God gets his cut. As far as how it reduces empathy, it increases your ego about yourself to the point that you diminish the value of other human beings around you. And these two comments are great emphasis of it, where we're going to have the Israelites kill people because they're in the way of God's plan of salvation. Okay. If you, and we got to make sure God gets his cut after all the violence is wrong. We got to make sure the plunder goes to God because these people are in the way. I mean, not to mention the reinforcement of tribalism, that my tribe's better than yours, and therefore I can diminish the human value of your tribe because they're not Christian, they're not Islamic. I could throw this with all religions. I really could. It's the, I'm just doing what God told me to. I mean, you can literally justify anything, any absolute evil action by saying, well, God told me to do it. This is why in that video I said divine command theory is a joke. God's judgment is not morally perfect. Okay. That is a statement for which you have no evidence if you take the biblical God. The biblical God, they're destroyed because of sin. I don't believe sin exists. I think it's a made up theological concept. Okay, prove to me that it's not just made up by the Bible. That's a precept, okay, which I don't accept here. You have to prove your presuppositions, okay? I don't allow that, okay? It's just not there, okay? To me, I don't feel sin exists, so it's made up. It doesn't prove your point. It proves that you have no point. Okay, you're just making stuff up to make an argument. Okay, and so from my perspective, human empathy is just not that. Once again, that's a precept. Christian James, you're just throwing precept after precept, unproved cake, whatever. It doesn't matter. You're just throwing up stuff. Okay, and it shows that you don't have any empathy for other people. You just don't want to recognize it. Okay. That somehow other people are lesser because they want to be lost in their sin. That is absolutely a doctrine that leads you to think lesser of them and more of yourself. It's an ego booster. Okay. That's of course, because I'm the one to blame and you're not, because you have the truth and I do not. That's your ego trip. And therefore I'm going to burn in hell and you're not. I don't know how much more diminishing of human empathy you can be to think that somebody deserves to roast in hell for something that they did in a temporal existence. Empathy isn't about loving other people. Empathy is about whether you consider them as equal value to yourself. Christianity definitely diminishes anybody who's not part of your club is not as valuable as you as a human being. I used to see it all the time. Yes, the Bible teaches that, but if you're a Christian, do you agree with it? Yes. I'm sorry. The Bible teaches that, but that's not what I said. It's what the Bible said. Well, you agree with the Bible, right? So you would say it if you want to be lined up with what your teachings tell you, would it? Okay. Do you hear what I don't know. Um, you mods will have to decide what to do with Mr. Christian James. He's trying to dominate the conversation. So, I'll let you make that decision at some point. But getting back to the empathy question, it's not about that at all. Okay, it's not about that at all. If you think so much of yourself that you think you're special and chosen, and you know, okay, thank you. It's you. You got to prove those presuppositions to me. Okay, it's not a question to me of when you can say that some people are lesser in value because they don't accept your message, you're already making a judgment call about them, that they are lesser than you because you have the truth, you have the thing, you have all of this. Okay. I, I'm sorry. It's an ego trip. You know, I hear it all the time that atheists are, oh, you have a big ego to dismiss the existence of God. I think you guys have a big ego in thinking that you have the truth and everybody else is just lost. Okay, that's a pretty big ego trip on itself. Uh, it's just, I don't know. I'm not trying to be rude, but when you sit there and I talk about the genocides of the southern cities in the story of Joshua, and your response is they had to go because they were in the way of God's plan of salvation. Well, that's a pretty sucky plan of salvation. I thought you were trying to save humans, not kill them. And then you want to talk about how they destroyed everything because then God gets his cut. Okay, come on, man. So people had to die so God gets his cut. That's how much more diminishing and lacking in human empathy do you have to be when you have that mentality? And to me, when you look at, I remember so much when I deconverted, one of the things I was very glad of is I didn't have to hate people unnecessarily anymore. I could look at the content of people's actions to see whether I disliked them or not. I didn't have to just look at um, a person and say, oh, well, they're LGBTQ, so I can hate them. It's okay. I can dislike them. I can think of lesser of them because of it. I don't have that anymore. It's they have to go. They have to get out of the way. And you don't see that as a diminishing of your empathy towards other people? That somehow, well, everything had to be destroyed to make sure God got his cut from these people once they're dead. That's not lacking in empathy. Okay. I'm not trying to, how do you maintain that you have human empathy and human love when that is your theology about other people? Please tell me how that's the case. I really want to know. Um, I think Zen is just complete. Sin is completely made up. And all these presuppositions about God's plan. That's part of my deconversion story. I had somebody ask, what was it that led me away, and it was like Dan Barker's quote about sin being a made up problem with a made up solution became annoying to the point that I had to. I got to a point in 1 Corinthians 5 where I was preaching about it, trying to keep sin out of the church, and I suddenly realized the only place that sin comes up is in the Bible. Okay. It's literally a theological concept that's made up by early ancient theologians in order to explain something. And then they come along with this solution to, you know, to save us all with Jesus. And I have to ask the question at that point, how do you know that sin is even real if you didn't have the Bible? How do you know that salvation isn't the solution if you didn't have the Bible? The Bible makes those two assertions, those two presuppositions. If you don't have a God, you don't have commands by God. And if you don't have commands by God, you don't have sin. That's the biblical definition of sin. And so let's just get rid of that. Okay. You are making stuff up. These ancient people made stuff up to explain something, and you're just reinforcing that explanation, which makes no sense in the modern day anymore. It just doesn't exist. Okay. So, I mean, as far as reducing empathy, I remember, I'll tell a little story here because I think it illustrates the point. When I was in high school, and I was a very much fundy Christian at the time, I sat next to a young lady who I knew at the time was a lesbian. Okay. And I remember, and she was one of our big athletes, okay, in school too. She got the crap beat out of her one day. And I remember my emotions at the time were, well, that's kind of what you get when you're that way. And now I'm very embarrassed about that because now it's like, no, she's a human being and she doesn't deserve to have the crap beat out of her because of who she is or what choices she has made that don't harm anybody else. And the lifting, okay, of that bigotry off of my back, because that's what it is, it's bigotry. And allowing me to analyze people for what they do and how they act towards others has been a big help for me. And it's something that deconversion, I suddenly didn't have all these reasons to hate people simply because of who they were and the choices they had made. And so, when I got to that moment where I realized sin was imaginary, a lot of that lifted my ego about myself, just diminished. I had a comment this week about somebody made the comment about, well, I just can't accept that I'm an animal. And that's just loaded with ego. Okay, it's just loaded with ego. There's something very humbling about realizing that you're just another animal spinning on this rock in space that's so small that by the time you get to a certain distance, nobody can see it. It's very humbling to me. And you lose a lot of the ego trip that religion gives to you, particularly Christianity does with its salvation narrative, that you're special because you get to see and understand the truth of Jesus and everybody else is lost, and now you have this ego about yourself. And I think that's what needs to go. It needs to go. And it's just centered on that. And I don't have any place for it in my life anymore. And I think that's one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, is losing the ego that religion gave me. Um, I do have some other comments about the two or three witnesses thing. It's kind of a continuing thing about the Gospels. I just started my series yesterday where I'm going to be going through the life of Christ one step at a time. I'm not sure how many videos that'll be. It'll be whenever I get one of them done. It's a subject that interests me because that's what I taught Life of Christ many times when I was a pastor and Christian education pastor and director. And so it's one of those things that was very elemental in my deconversion when I realized how much myth and stuff is surrounded the life of Jesus, and how the four gospels aren't really four witnesses of that. In fact, that was kind of the argument this commenter made, who was a Christian. He says, well, the fact still remains, we have four gospels. And my response is, actually, you have 37 or 38 of them. I didn't respond to him in the comments, but I want to respond to him here. You actually have 30 some gospels, or maybe 40. I'm not sure. The count keeps going up. And And there's a reason why the four that you have were selected by the church. You need to understand that. There's a certain theology that they have that the church at the time agreed with. There's certain things about the other gospels that are Gnostic, and they didn't want those Gnostic gospels in there, so they pushed them out. There's a whole bunch of editing to get you down to the four gospels in the first place. And some would argue, well, that just proves there's a lot of witnesses of Jesus. No, the problem is a lot of these gospels contradict each other. Okay. And I think the church picked the four that had the right theology that they already preconceived and that didn't contradict each other as much as the rest of them did. Okay. And they do contradict each other, but they went with the lesser of evils in their mind. And that's why they picked the four. So that doesn't really prove anything either. One of the other comments in that comment was, well, they must have seen something. And my response is, that's a horrible argument. It's a terrible argument. They must have seen something. Are you kidding me? I could literally use that argument with every other holy book that exists. I could do that with people who say they saw this and that and the others. There's hundreds of people that claim that they see aliens, ghosts, and whatever else. Well, they must have seen something. It must be true because they must have seen something. It's a horrible argument. So when I go through this series, you need to understand that I'm dealing with this two or three witnesses question at two levels. One, the gospels within each other, and who the hell would have witnessed the story in the first place? Yes, seen with their perfectly designed eyes. Yes. Okay. Yes. Um, yeah, that's why I wear contacts and probably need to go see the eye doctor again shortly. But my perfectly designed eyes. Um, I don't know. I know for myself that studying the life of Christ was what led. Probably 50% of my deconversion is based on simply looking at the life of Jesus, and so it's not that. Okay, it's not anything about that. It, it it's more about, can we prove the gospels were anything? What are they? I've now gotten to the point in this teaching of the life of Christ, I want to know what the gospels actually are, and not through any kind of lenses. I want to look at this two or three witness question, but I want to know what the gospels actually are. Somebody made the comment about the connections to various mythological other things. And I've made the remark before that it's not necessarily there's a direct connection, but you can definitely see the idea. I think a good example is Jesus turning the water into wine, kind of thing. And yeah, Dionysus does that too. Okay, there's definitely some, the idea existed in the world. So it's not a new and unique thing. I think the third question, some of the third question that I'm going to deal with that series is, where could the writers have gotten this idea to write about? I think that's a good way to look at it. And so getting rid of the two or three witnesses question is just going to be one of the things that I do. Yeah, yeah, Fred, I think you got a point. They're tools. Okay, there's a reason why the church canonized these things, 3 or 4 centuries out. Before, they didn't seem to have the need to canonize them. Okay, and there's something that shifted in the church that caused them to say, you know, we need to have this. Why did they need to elevate the tool to canonize status is probably a really good question too. So there's that. So I don't know. I think the gospel series is going to do very, very well. Um, I'm I'm just not sure. I may make them very, very short videos where I just kind of deal with one topic and get two or three of them out a week. I'm not sure yet, but it'll have the same. For you members that are members of the channel, you'll get those first, and then they'll come out a little bit later than that. But it's a series I've been meaning to do. I tried to do it once before, and it just didn't work out. And I was just I went like, oh crap, it wasn't satisfying to me. And I think the way I'm doing it now, this will be much more satisfying in doing it. Michael, I'm going to tell you something. That's a very good question. I grew up in the Assemblies of God, which is a teetotaler denomination. You're not allowed to drink alcohol in the Assemblies of God to maintain your membership. And the reason that is they were born during the temperance movement. If you look at Pentecostal history, they come out of the temperance movement, and so then you have the story where Jesus is turning water into wine, and the excuses that come out of that story from the Pentecostal movement I thought were hilarious. Well, it wasn't real wine, it was just grape juice, or on and on the list goes. And it's like, um, it gets problematic. And so you have all these denominations that want to get rid of alcohol, they want to get rid of drugs and everything else. And it's like, I don't know, Jesus seems to be endorsing, some wine there at a party for all that. Yeah. Um, so I've always found Christian theology about behavior to be very slippery. If anybody else has noticed, how did they keep it from fermenting? I don't think they did. I want to know what Jesus's technique is, because I think it was instantly fermented and didn't take the time. We need that guy for wine production. So no, sorry, Christian. Wine was alcoholic. Okay, it was definitely alcoholic back then. It's the same stuff. There's two different words in Greek for grape juice and wine, and they definitely use the one for alcoholic wine. The excusegetics about it is amazing. But I really want to know what Jesus's technique is, because we could open up a vineyard. We wouldn't even need a vineyard to do wine. We could just make some out of water all the time. So there's that. Yeah, some denominations don't eat pork, Paul. The Seventh-day Adventists are very, very, very much that way. They're very Old Testament oriented. Okay, mods. All right, I'm going to warn you, Christian. I don't allow proselytization here. This is a space for people who deconvert to not have to deal with that. Okay, you can engage the discussion, but no preaching, please. Thank you. I was reminded of something with Tim Mills. Thank you, guys, mods. I want to thank the mods today very much. Thank you very much for that. But because sometimes I don't have the heart to pull the trigger, to be honest. I was on Tim Mills's live stream a week or two ago, and he reminded me that he was trying to create a space where people who are deconverting can go and safely converse about things without being preached to. And I think I want to have that attitude from our mods too. Okay. Thank you very much for that. But yes, the Seventh Day Adventists, I had dealings with them when I was a congregational pastor a couple of times, and I would read their doctrines. They're very much, we need to follow the Old Testament stuff as much as possible as far as diet. They didn't eat pork, they didn't eat shellfish, all that stuff. Um, so there's very much that Old Testament vein of I'm going to follow the commands of the Old Testament as much as possible. That's why they meet on Saturdays as well, because that's the Sabbath. You're supposed to meet on the Sabbath and do all that stuff. So, my issue with that, even back as a Christian, was the slipperiness back and forth between what Jesus says, what Paul says, what Paul deals with the Old Testament law. I mean, Paul is even arguing against actual physical circumcision at one point. So there's that aspect of it. Okay, that you're dealing with stuff that's old. I mean, Jesus violates Sabbath rules all the time, and then makes the excuse, or the reason is the Sabbath's great for man, not man for the Sabbath. So it's one of those things where, you know, it's kind of slippery when it comes to different denominations. I rubbed shoulders with a lot of denominations. And when it came to rules like that, like dietary restrictions, um, stuff like that, in the Assemblies of God, one of the things that now bothers me immensely is that they forbid us from going, as young people, from going to dances. So I never learned how to dance as an Assembly of God boy, because dancing leads to, boy girl touching, and boy girl touching leads to sex, and we don't want that. So we're just going to eliminate the problem by not allowing people to do it in the first place. So um, there was a lot of mentality of holiness in the Assemblies of God still left over from the holiness movements. So it was kind of, so I don't know. I'm, I look back at a lot of that stuff, Seventh Day Adventists, things like that, and they're very slippery on, even within the Seventh Day Adventist. I'm wondering if they mix their fabrics, cotton and wool. Is a cotton and wool blend a violation of the scripture? I think it is. There's just all these little details. I'm fairly certain you're not allowed to get tattoos, stuff like that. Yes, the Bible does not mention Jesus dancing, Michael. That is granted, but it does mention David dancing naked. So, and Jesus is supposed to be kind of a type of David as well. So it may not have happened, but it could have happened. I don't know. But yeah, there's just this. I don't know. It's not that just religion gets rid of your empathy all that well too, but it also just gets rid of, the fun factor of life. I mean, the whole problem I have with the doctrine of sin is it really diminishes your ability to experience life if you had he had a Honda. Yeah. This is why, you know what? Asshole, this is why we keep you around. It keeps everything lighthearted. God changed his mind later on. Yes, I know. There's just this, Christians have this tension. And as somebody who grew up in it, was a pastor in it for 20 years, there's always this tension of which parts of the Bible do we follow and how much do we follow. And there's a whole bunch of subjective moral judgments in a supposed objective moral framework because the commands come up from God. And it's one of the things I pointed out in my video on morality last week is how subjective that gets. The interpretive aspects just make divine command theory, the divine command theory video, actually, it just makes it slippery. You can make it mean anything you want. The commandments of God aren't as arbitrary. And, you have this is proved by, the Jewish people themselves, in the fact that they have their Old Testament law, and then they have all these writings to kind of explain what it means. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just um, so there's that aspect of it. They're just the two or three witnesses. This is going to be dog commands. So you're a dyslexic atheist. You don't believe there's a dog, Fred? Um, I don't know. I've been a I've been both, I guess, for a while now. Um, so what we have now, I did want to talk about the presidential race here in the United States briefly, because we have a debate on Tuesday, and I'm absolutely looking forward to the entertainment of it. It's going to be interesting, I think, from an entertainment point of view, for a political science major. Dogma, sheesh. Okay. Uh, this is why I love my people. Oh, yeah. Michael, you make a valid point. The Catholics do seem to have more fun because they have this confession thing. Because they have this more works oriented solving the righteousness problem. Yeah. Yeah. You can go out and have fun and then, oh, well, that's just the way I am. I'll fix it at church. It's a very interesting point of view. I've had all kinds of religions comment on this channel over here, but the Catholics are usually the most interesting, and they're both the best and the worst commenters sometimes. The guy I mentioned at the beginning of this live stream, he's a Catholic because he talks about the Blessed Virgin several times. So there's that aspect. But as far as the election goes, one interesting thing I read, and I couldn't find it, and it annoyed me, but there was a new poll of Christians and how they were voting, and the Catholics are actually 50% for Harris in this poll. And I thought either that's a typo and a mistake, or something's going on in the Catholics in the United States. They're clearly not following the Pope very much. So that was an interesting thing. I'm always trying to find the religious aspects of this. I have noticed that the Project 2025 reporting has dropped considerably since Trump basically says, I really don't have anything to do with that. And I think that's the problem with the whole Project 2025 thing in the beginning of this, why I haven't commented on it much, because I think it was just the Heritage Foundation blowing smoke. And yes. And so I don't know. The religious aspects of this seem to be out of there, but we'll see. I want to see what happens during the debate if anybody ever mentions anything religious. That's my biggest interest. I want to see if either Trump or Harris mention Christians and religious people. Oh, yes. Bavarians are mostly Catholic. Just look at the Oktoberfest, the original one. That strikes me home, seeing I'm a quarter Bavarian myself, so that's where my German heritage comes from. So, anybody want California weather? No, I don't. I'm actually, the thing is, Iron. I talked to you earlier, but it was like I'm feeling really good right now. I was talking about this with my family, my daughter, my mother. One of my grandkids has this issue too. We all suddenly felt better once the temperature dropped 20 degrees. Okay. And we all felt better now that it's more cloudy. So it's funny because I'm absolutely in love with the weather right now because I feel much, much better. I haven't felt this good since summer started. So my hypersensitivity issues are dropped, and boy, I'm feeling a little bit more energetic. So no, I don't want your weather. It's too hot. Yeah, Michael, that's the thing about this is what bothers me about American politics the most is how very difficult it is to be an atheist and run for office. Um, it's why I stopped. Okay, I realized that there wasn't a chance in hell of getting elected in a red part of the state where you are known to be a person who doesn't believe in God. Even the Democrats around here give some service to believing in God. Uh, because if you don't, God bless America, all that stuff has to come out. 2028, what am I running for, asshole? I want to know what office I should run for. But yeah, I've served on a school board 3 times. So um, I ran for those offices my life. Okay. Um, yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I'm kind of content, asshole, to be the resident dictator for life here at the Rabyd Nation. So I may be content with that. Um, God catcher, man, that would be a great job because there's nothing to do. Can I get that? Can I get like all the bureaucratic things that they give you from the federal government so that you can just kind of sit around, make money, and do nothing? That'd be a great one. Catching God. I can't catch God. He doesn't exist, as far as I can tell. I need to know where to look. But yeah, I don't know. I'm the biggest problem I have with politics in the United States is that you can't be a secularist. You can't be a free thought person even. And you're right, Fred. I could. There's some great jobs in the government where people don't do much and they make a shit ton of money to do it. Real interesting stuff. The problem with getting a political science degree here in the United States is you start to study the bureaucracy, the fourth branch of government in the United States, all the alphabet soup that exists in Washington, and you realize there's some really great gigs in this government where you just basically sit at a desk, punch buttons at a computer, and make a six-figure salary. I'm not even joking, and it's one of the frustrating things about our government at times is the level of bureaucracy that it has. But there's nobody elected there, so um, they're all appointees or hirelings, so can't do much about that. But I don't know. I would like to have someday a presidential election, and maybe that's possible in my lifetime, where one of the candidates doesn't believe in God and has a legitimate chance to win. I think that would be a major goal for a lot of us atheists to see that where we are finally represented, at some point, or just somebody in Congress. I know there's a few that are in there now, but when you consider the fact that atheism in the United States is climbing and it'll be probably 10% in another 4 years or so, you should probably see 10% of Congress that doesn't believe in God. Okay. But we don't see that. We still see giving lip service to Christians in order to get there. So we'll see. Um, but yeah, I'm very interested in to see what the two candidates will say about religion and Christianity. We'll see what happens, if anything happens at all. So we'll see. Any other comments that I think of that need to be dealt with? I think I've dealt with most of them in my pre-stuff. So um, I am very excited about this Life of Christ. So I'm very excited about that series, and I think I'm going to do it maybe a couple times a week. So just to get my content back up. But one of the things I've noticed about my channel right now is the views are down by quite a bit. Membership is way up thanks to a lot of generous donations. Thank you very much. But the views are down of the videos. The reaction videos still do very well, but some of the rest of them don't do as well. And the views overall per week are dropped because I'm not doing as much content. So trying to find something quick and easy where people will watch, 5-7 minutes is good. And I think I can pull stuff from these live streams too. But I think the Life of Christ series is going to be something that's going to be kind of cornerstone to what I'm doing for a while. So hopefully that'll get things up a little bit. I'm trying to find easy ways to create good content without killing myself. See you later, Charles. Appreciate you coming by. So there's that aspect of it. What I want to do. Yes. Yeah, the thing is, Fred, you want to most know the most nonsensical thing about American politics? We have 345 million people and only two political parties that can win. You gotta, it's like going to the grocery store and walking in, and there's a red aisle and a blue aisle. And if you grab a cart from the red aisle or the blue aisle and you have to accept whatever's in that cart, go to the thing and check out. So um, that's American politics in a nutshell. Or you're literally going to the red grocery store. They give you a cart, you check you out. You never get to choose a damn thing. You just have to accept it. Um, as far as the electoral college goes, I'm not a negative detractor about that, Fred. The electoral college. The problem is we have state governments that have actual power, and so I try to explain it this way: we actually have 50 elections for the president. Okay. And you have to have a means by which you reconcile them without getting rid of the small states. A lot of people think that it was a slave state versus free state back in the day, but the people that advocated for the electoral college were also states like Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire back then too, because they were so small. Okay. And they didn't want to be bullied by the larger population states. So they created the electoral college to kind of give those smaller states a little bit more power in picking the president. So it's convoluted, it's kind of confusing, but in some ways I like it. If you don't like the form of democracy you're in, um, well, I think though, Michael, if we wanted fair representation, what we'd have to do is completely eliminate state governments, okay, and go to something else. And I'm not sure people are ready to do that. The practical problems of doing that is just way too insane. And you would have to find a way to get fair representation in the United States, and the state governments do kind of stand in the way of that. But at the same time, what they provide is if you don't like the form of democracy you're in your current state, you can always move to something else you like better. Democracy has a lot of expressions, and that's part of the problem too. It has its own problems. Yeah, yeah. No, it's not going to happen. Okay, I, I'm a very practical political scientist. I ask what can be done, what actually can be done with the current political system instead of dreaming so much. And I don't think the electoral college is going anywhere. Uh, the reason I say that is it would require a constitutional amendment, and Americans can't agree on anything more than 50% these days. So um, it's just not going to happen. You'd need a massive amount of support for that. And I just haven't seen it generated. It's just not going to happen, at least not in my lifetime, probably. Um, so there's that. I focus on what can be done. Um, and the real problem is I just don't feel like whoever's elected really represents me anymore. Um, uh, okay, Michael. I mean, I hear what you're saying. It would require what you're saying would work. I think there's some merit to what you're saying there, Michael. The problem is getting it to work, making it happen. Um, there's a practical aspect to politics that I learned while I was getting my degree and really thought about having run for office. It's like when you hear a candidate, they're very idealistic, especially if they're a first time candidate. This is what we want to do. This is what we're going to get done. All this stuff, and then they get into the office and realize that the system shuts down 50% of what they're going to try to do, and they can't do it at all. And that was my problem. When I got elected on the school board, there were certain things I wanted to change, but then I realized that some of it would require the changing of state law. And and so, you know, there's just you have to give people motivated for change, and there just isn't that. And you make an absolute good point. The two political parties right now have no reason to do anything to undercut their power. And as long as one of them, let me give you an example from local elections here in my area. If I wanted to run for county commissioner as an independent, I have to get 40 signatures to do that. Okay. If a person who is a member of a political party, like the Republicans or Democrats, wants to run for county commissioner, they have to sign their own name as their own person. That's it, and turn it in. And the Republicans and Democrats passed that law because they agreed in keeping independents and other parties out. They do that all the time. So, and that's just a local example, because when I went into it, I wanted to run for county commissioner probably about 6, 7 years ago. And I wanted to run as an independent because I didn't like either one of them. And they basically told me I needed 40 signatures. And I said, well, you know, and I'm like, why? The other guy, who's the Republican, only had to sign his own name to it, and he's on the ballot, and I have to get 40 signatures to get on the ballot. Yeah, that's the way it works. And this is what the Republicans and Democrats do all the time. They create rules like that to keep people out. They keep the independents out. The presidential debate's another good example of this. Anybody who has a mathematical chance to win the electoral college, like they have all their delegates and everything in line, should be allowed on the debate platform, in my opinion. But the debate committee will create the rule, oh, you got to be polling at least 15%, okay, to get up there. And it's like, okay, so you eliminated everybody but the two main political parties. They do this all the time. It's why when, you know, when I'm critical about the government, this is a lot to do with it. Okay, it's like you create a system. I remember sitting next to some of my fellow students in poli-sci at Ferris, and once the light bulbs begin to go on with this stuff, they're like going, "Oh, so it's like kind of rigged already." Exactly. Okay. I'm not saying we don't have some choices, but the choices that we have as American citizens are very limited. There's you're right. There is a large illusion of freedom, and the thing is, the American government realizes that if they give each individual a large amount of individual freedom, um, like you get to choose your job, you get to go choose where you go to school, you know, all those choices. Um, as long as you let people have those and take care of themselves, and they're not a burden to the government, go for it. They don't care until you threaten their power, and then that becomes a problem. Okay, it's so like I have a large problem with that, but I also realize there's not a whole hell of a lot I can do about it. But then I'm kind of the mindset of, you know, I'll follow the rules as long as they're not annoying. Okay, if they get to a certain level of annoyance, it's like, okay, how do I get away with breaking the rules? Jesus was the co-pilot. I'm not sure about that, Paul. Um, yeah, the thing is, Fred, I think most of us, the reason why a lot of people don't vote is that very reason. They realize it's screwball from the beginning, and they just realize that there's just not a lot of choices. I mean, you can say what you want about other countries and their governments, but some of them have 6, 7 political parties, and they have to cooperate with each other to get stuff done. We don't have that here. All you have to do is get one side completely in charge, and then you don't have to cooperate with anything. Um, you know, so there's that. Yeah, it very much is. Yeah, get a bulldozer. I know the reference there. Oh yes. As a libertarian, I'm a very classical liberal libertarian in how I think government should run, but I also know that I'm millions of miles away from that on a practical level. So I think the government is much better when it focuses on very limited things and does what it does well, and leaves the rest to the people. But that doesn't happen very often. Um, so there's that aspect of it. But I don't know. This debate has me interested in the fact that I want to see. The one thing I haven't really heard is kind of muddy right now is what is each candidate's vision for what they want to do with the presidency. Trump's been there before, but I think Harris's view of what she wants to do with the office is more my concern. But as I said, I'm sitting this one out. Yeah, they never talk policy. You're right, David. That's unfortunate. But what they do sometimes do is they'll hint at it. They'll accidentally give away stuff in the side comments. You got to watch for that stuff. Politicians are as slippery as preachers. So I've made the analogy that church and state are bedfellows because they're very similar. So smallest seed, yeah, probably yes, it is. Uh, I don't know. I don't know. My main concern is my own individual liberties and what people are going to muck that up with. So yes, but yeah, I can't remember what this actual smallest seed is in the world there, Paul, but I know it's not the mustard seed. The mustard seed is a little bit bigger than the smallest one. I remember studying that. That was one of my, because Jesus says that, and Jesus is supposed to be God. Okay, so, and apparently he didn't know that. Figure that one out. Um, I don't know. Is there anything else that people said? Oh, I wanted to. The kid on the first video this week I reacted to, there was some discussion about that channel, Road Trip to Truth. And somebody pointed out to me that it's actually Frell's kind of puppet channel with John. And I I want to let everybody know my heart here when it comes to young apologists and young preachers. I hope they figure this shit out before I did. Okay, I don't want them to waste their time with this stuff. Um, oh, okay. See, this another reason we keep you around as so you can research useless knowledge because I don't know how that's going to be useful, but it was useful today. Um, I love you, asshole. That's why I pick on you so much. Um, and so, but I was looking at this guy, and I'm like, I'm really hoping that the reason there's no third, season for Road Trip to Truth is because he's starting to question things, and maybe that's why Mr. Frell is pulling him off the project and may give that channel to somebody else. That's a possibility, but I know that John himself got a lot of comments back on his videos from other points of view, and I'm really hoping that that's the case. I really, for a lot of you young people out there, if you're watching this video, it's still my same message to you. If you're young and thinking about going into the ministry, I ask you to consider a couple of things first. Go find something to do that'll make you a lot of money. You may need it because ministry for the most of the churches is small and it ain't going to pay you crap. So go find something that you can support your family with if that's your goal. And the other thing is wait until you're 30 when you have more of your brain cells developed and you can analyze this stuff. And, if I had done those two things, I probably would not have gone into the ministry and I would have been far better off in my life. And, I wouldn't have this wonderful channel with all you people, but because I'd have gone a different direction. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that I feel I wasted my time on. And yeah, we all kind of outgrow it. And the problem is I see a lot of these young apologists and young preachers, and they're very heavily invested in this. Isn't it also amazing how many sons of some of these apologists are involved these days? Sean McDowell's son's involved in his. Holy crap. Turek, I'm not sure if Turk has his, but the cold case detective, he has his kid in there. Uh, all of these guys are dragging their sons into this, and I have to ask why that is. Why is this a family thing? And is it the charlatan and fraud? It has to be passed on to the next generation because a lot of these guys are getting old. Thank you, Fred. I appreciate that. I get that everybody is very thankful for me, but on a personal level, um, I do feel this is why I have therapy, because I do feel I wasted a lot of my life doing stuff that's nonsensical. Um, and I looking at it now as something. My biggest problem in the ministry is I couldn't be dishonest about what I really believed, and that became a problem the more I learned. So, um, so I think when I look at these apologists, I have to wonder why the children are following suit. And a lot of you have made it. It's like, um, it's the money involved. I mean, it's good money to just stand in front of people and talk. Okay. And it's tax free money, as Aso just pointed out. And so, yeah, I can see why this would be a family thing. And it's kind of scary, though, because it's one thing to waste your life on something you believe, but to drag your kid into it. Now, maybe these children are absolutely convinced, just like their parents, and that might be a possibility. I'm not saying that, but you got to understand that they're looking around and saying, "Yeah, my dad just kind of talks about crap and makes money." Um, I guess I can see it if you're big, but a lot of I've watched a lot of small apologist channels over the last 4 or 5, be fifth year anniversary coming up in January of this channel, and a lot of them are non-existent anymore. Okay, because they couldn't cut it, they couldn't get past that certain level, and it makes me wonder what the future holds for apologetics. A lot. I know that they're getting their butt kicked. Um, yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I'm concerned about the young people going into this, because when you know something's a fraud and then you see a bunch of young people going into it, people ask me my motivation for this channel. Well, why do you want to talk about something you don't even believe in? And oh, you guys are bringing up a song I love. Merlin, I don't think that line's in that one. Dire Straits did a great song there. I remember that video when it came on MTV. It was the first time you saw CGI in a video, I think, and it was really bad by today's standards. So, but yeah, I mean, it's like I get the money aspect, but why would it's like teaching your kid to be a fraud, to be a snake oil salesman, and I have to wonder about the genuine honesty of a lot of Christians. It's kind of hard for me now. Um, Michael, that's the most valid theory I've heard in a while. They couldn't make it as rock stars, and they switched to apologetics. That's probably carny. I mean, and the thing is, about carnies and stuff. I don't mind going to a carny because I know it's a game. Okay, and I kind of want to see the game and see it's kind of like when Penn and Teller analyze magic tricks. They know it's bullshit. There's some trick. There's some sleight of hand there. It's figuring out where. That's the thing. It's the same. I don't mind carnies, because at least in a very real way, I know that they're full of shit, and they know they're full of shit, and we're all having fun with everybody being full of shit. But apologists are serious about their shit. Okay. Um, yes, yes. Hit the like button. Yes. Um, just, that's what bothers me is, you know, when you're a con and you're a con man and everybody knows you're a con man, it's fun. Okay. It's all about, having fun with that, the deception and going back and forth. But when you are an apologist, you're promoting that this is the truth and you can put your bank and stock your life in it. And that's where the analogy of the snake oil salesman back in the day and still today exists, by the way, they're just very much more sophisticated, really hits, because you're making a claim that this is going to benefit people and this is why they should believe it. And then people follow it. Um, yeah, exactly. Doorknob head. The carney is, I'm full of shit. I know I'm full of shit, and we're going to have fun with that. Okay. We're all full of shit here and we're just going to have fun. But that's not what happens in religion. Religion, I think some of these religious people know they're full of shit, but they can't let anybody know that. And that is the real thing that bothers me. And when I see young people caught up in this and the sons of these apologists coming up into it, it's like, oh my God, you bastards. I don't have any nice things to think about them. Um, this is the thing about live streams. You're going to get some of my real emotions despite my autistic masking from time to time. But yeah, I don't get it. I've, having come out of that, when I saw the light and realized, oh my God, I was so personally, internally embarrassed for myself that I was a fraud and hadn't realized it that whole time. And now I had, and then I had the problem of 2 years of preaching while knowing that. And I'm like, God damn it. How do I get out of this? And that's why the Clergy Project exists, by the way, people, because you can sit there and say, oh, you can just drop it and leave. It's not that simple. Okay. It's just not that simple. And I get it. For a lot of these kids, they're caught up in it. They want to have good relationships with their dad or whatever. And yeah, what faith was I? That's a complicated question. I grew up Assemblies of God Pentecostal. I was an ordained minister in the Assemblies of God Michigan district for 10 years, 8 years, because I was a licensed minister for 2 years. I left that and became a Congregationalist, an independent Congregationalist. So at that point, I would say I was basically Christian. I make the joke about my last church as it was the island of misfit toys. There were Christians that didn't fit anywhere, so they came to my church. Um, so we believed the Bible was the word of God, in quotes, and we and we believed in the Trinity and Jesus, salvation, and that Jesus was going to return, and that was pretty much it. Okay, so everything else was negotiable. I was probably the best church I had when I really look at it. I had former Catholics, former Lutherans, former Episcopalians, former Pentecostals, former Baptists, you name it, I had it in front of me in my last church. But they came there because they liked me and they liked the more openness to their faith that we had there. One of the better churches on the planet. Still, they're all crap, but this one had the least amount of crap. Yeah, a lot of good conversations because there was a lot of different faiths. And one of the things about that last church is it allowed me, and I think I go over this in my deconversion story if you want the whole thing, which is like several hours. Um, yeah. Wow, the rapture thing flying. You know, how do I know some of you are parents? The puns. It's the puns. So I don't know. It was the openness of that last church that allowed me to explore my faith without worrying about the denominational heads saying, you can't do that. That was my biggest problem with being in the Assemblies of God is there were certain doctrines that in the 16 fundamental truths of the Assemblies of God that I wanted to challenge, but I couldn't do that and keep my credentials. That was the one thing you couldn't do. And so that, yes, the dad jokes, yes. And that was one of the problems I had with it. And that's why I left it. Part of the reason I left it, but the other part was I kind of got screwed over by denominational leadership in the sense that somebody had to be blamed for the failures in these churches. And not that I had any personal failure, but they kind of threw me to the curb. And probably one of the most infuriating moments is after I got fired from my last church in the Assemblies of God, the treasurer of the denomination calls me up and asks me why I haven't tithed in a couple of months. I'm like, dude, I don't have a job. Okay. Last I looked, 10% of nothing is nothing, so so yeah, so I don't know. When I look at my past as my former religion, I think my last church allowed me for about 10 years to explore every version of Christianity and see whether it had value. And when you come up with a big fat zero at the end of all that, yeah, you kind of realize that there's something wrong with the whole thing. So, yeah, exactly. And They wanted me to tithe off of nothing. They wanted me to give them money that I had in savings or something to maintain my credentials. And it was at that point I took my Assembly of God Michigan District credentialing card that said I was an ordained minister and lit it up with a match, quite literally. So, um, if that's the way you're going to be, I'm done. Okay, so um, that was my unceremonious leaving. Yes, fire. Uh, I don't know. This is my deconversion story has a lot of elements to it. It just took so long. It just took so long. Um, yeah, I mean, we're going back to our beginning topic. I actually think that segues in. Um, that my treasurer of my denomination was so unconcerned about my human situation that he was still asking for money. That's another effect of religion, I think, that you can't even understand a person at that point because the tithe has to be made, regardless of what you're going through. Um, yeah, yeah, beyond, you're right. I, I have a specific point where I gave up on Christianity finally, but where I lost faith in it, that's a good question. Um, on a yeah, it is an empathy thing again. They just, you know, their doctrine doesn't allow them to look at me as a human being and say, "Hey, you know what Ed probably could have used in that moment? Hey, let's open up the district checkbook and send him a check because that's what I needed. I needed a way to get through that financial time because I was out without a job for a bit." Um, and none of that never came from the denomination. In fact, quite the opposite. Um, it's, I think the thing with deconversion is there is a good point to be made because the reality of what conversion is or becoming saved is a questionable thing. Does that really happen? To me, as an atheist, sometimes people come on here and they say you were never saved in the first place. And I look them in the eye or get on this format and say, yeah, you're right. And you know what? Neither are you. You're not saved either because that's just myth. That's just nonsense. Nobody's ever saved. Okay. And boy, did they get annoyed with that one. So, what really conversion and deconversion is this indoctrination into a religion, and then you get out of the religion and you tear yourself away from it and you unravel it. And so it's more of a thing about religion and the psychological and social effects that religion have on you than it is actual. I turned my, I got that all the time. This week somebody said, "So what caused you to turn your back on God?" And I don't know. It's like it's a long process. I'm not turning my back on God. I just turned my back on bad belief systems. Um, yeah, Paul. They use that all the time. Okay. And it's like I look them in the eye and say, "Yeah, you're right. I'm not saved. I never really was saved, and neither are you." Yeah, turn your back on who again? Yes, exactly, Fred. It's it's a constant struggle for me because in running this channel, because I get that comment all the time, what happened to you? What evil thing happened to you to cause you to lose your faith? And it's like nothing. I mean, don't get me wrong. As a former pastor, I've got my horror stories of people stabbing me in the back. There's tons of them, and probably every small, town pastor has those stories because you're so dependent on other people for your livelihood. And if you're a sincere believing pastor, it gets worse because you get to see the ugliness of faith and you don't know what to do with it. And but at the same time, I had lots of bad experiences in the ministry, but it never stopped. That never caused me to leave my faith. It was, yeah, it was looking at the claims of Christianity with as an objective eye as possible and trying to reconcile it with reality. And after a while, you're like, no, this isn't real. Um, yeah, I mean, if I'm a member of the Clergy Project, so the horror stories are legion. Okay, especially when like some of them come to us after the fact. They've already left their church, like I did. I came to the Clergy Project after the fact, and it's how you are kicked out when you tell them you don't believe anymore. It The worst anathema you could do to any religious Christian organization in particular is tell people that you don't believe in God anymore as you're walking out the door, because they will literally find ways to make your life more difficult. That didn't necessarily happen to me. I left for a different reason, and there were different circumstances surrounding that, which I go to into in my deconversion story. But there's a lot of stories of how badly former pastors are treated once they walk away from faith altogether. There's a definite book there that somebody could research and write. How people are treated after they leave the faith. Shunning is a mild term. Um, and so it's kind of one of those things where when you go through it, it's very emotionally jarring. I would say that my lack of faith didn't play as much into it as others, but I've heard the stories. In my case, it was more I did something that they didn't expect, have an affair, and a bunch of people piled on that and got me kicked out, pretty much, got me fired. Um, Although I had resigned anyway. I resigned before they fired me, but they still had to go through the whatever to fire me. Um, which justified them not paying me severance when I left. So, which is still a sore spot between me and them. Um, so, yeah, I don't know. When I look at deconversion now, is it really so much turning your back on God? No, it's more of losing the indoctrination. Um, ye, Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate it. Um, yeah, yeah. It's a waking up to realizing that your religion is bullshit. Okay, is what it is, and the indoctrination begins to unravel. It's I. There's no God to walk away from in my perspective. And so when apologists use that, they're already using a bad tactic, because if you're going to convince somebody of your point of view, you have to understand what their point of view is. And apologists have this automatic problem of doing that. Um, and so there's this element where they assume about you as an atheist, and their assumptions lead them off track. And so they don't really reach you. And that's why I've said for years, apologetics isn't about reaching people for Christ anymore. It's about keeping people in the faith. It's about keeping the indoctrination going. To all of you in the comments, thank you for your emotional support. I still deal with, I live in my hometown. I live here. My church is literally, my old church is 5 miles down the road. Um, and I still run into people that used to be part of my church. And it's always something in between us as human beings still. Okay. Even so, it's one of those things. But I think that also kind of led to my divorce too, though, as my wife would say, maybe religion didn't have much to do with it. I would say the fact that she remained a believer and continued to go to church and was probably getting all this advice, about how to handle me that's completely wrong. And she wouldn't go to therapy sessions together so we could work that out. She didn't want to do that. It kind of, because I'm just going to pray and put my trust in Jesus and it'll fix it. Well, it didn't fix it. Um, and that kind of led to that. So, um, I don't know. When I look back at that time in my life, there's a lot of emotions, and not a lot of good ones. And I didn't understand myself very well. I didn't know I was autistic at that time. I didn't know I was hypersensitive. I didn't know that I had a lot of other things that indoctrination of faith put into me. So um, it just kind of it now that that's becoming less and less a part of it, I can see it clearer of what was going on emotionally speaking, and it was really rough for me, but I guess understandable. I do take it a lot of this as a learning experiences, but it's become the basis of this channel in a lot of ways. I'm here to help people who are deconverting. Okay, I am here to push people over the edge away from their faith. I am not here to be, if you're a theist, I am not here to be your friend in that sense. I'm not going to reinforce your faith. I'm going to do quite the opposite. I am, you know, yes, Fred. Oh, guys get me with the Monty Python stuff every time. But yeah, I'm not here to be your friend if you're a theist. Um, I think you're indoctrinated. I think your empathy towards other people outside your little in group is diminished. I think you're wasting a lot of your time, money, and opportunities. And there's that. Okay. And so I'm coming at it. It's funny because I get into these comment battles and I already know what they're going to say because I read their mail. I don't have a problem with deists. Some of them have had problems with me as an atheist, but I don't have a problem with deists. I will say that I think deism is nothing more than religion light. Okay, like very light. You're trying to keep the little best elements of faith. That's fine if that's what you want to do. I don't have a problem with that. I had a discussion with a pagan this week. I don't have a problem with paganism either. They're not trying to force me to be their religion. I think, yeah, I, I'll be honest. I do think deism is kind of a waste of time. It's kind of trying to hold on to something of faith that you can't prove. Um, but I don't have a problem with deists in general most of the time because they're not trying to force me to become a deist. Okay. They're not trying to get me to follow that ethic and that morality like the monotheistic Abrahamic religions try to do. Um, so I don't have a problem with them, guys. I don't have a problem with it all. Tastes great, less filling. Yeah, that's probably a good, accurate description of deism. But I've had discussion with pagans. You can have a great discussion with pagans on human virtue, and you'll be right in line with atheism and virtue ethics, and you can get along with them, and they're not trying to force me to be a pagan. So the one guy put it basically, I just still believe that there's something beyond man and this world and this life. Okay, fair enough. You can hold on to that if you want. And they're not trying to make me into something else, and they're not coming up to me and say, "Oh, you really believe in God? You just hate him." No pagan, no Norse pagan is coming out. You really believe in Odin and Thor and all that shit, and you just deny their existence because you want to live in sin. They don't come up to me and tell me that. Christians do, not them. So yeah, my main issue with religion is how it tries to force everybody. It's the religions that try to force everybody to be something they're not. Okay, and everybody's got to live this certain ethic or else kind of attitude. I don't have a problem with people that are, you want to believe what you want to believe, go ahead. I don't have a problem with that. If Christians just believed in God, um, and left me alone, I wouldn't care. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Fred's got it. Give me some convincing evidence that your faith and your God is true. Otherwise, I'm just going to smile and walk away. Okay. I'm much more, people ask me how well do I feel now that I no longer have faith? And it's like, I feel great. Okay. Uh, do I think a world without religion is possible? You and I are going to die before that happens. Do I think it's a possibility? Yes. Do I think it's going to take 200 years? Yes. Okay. The problem with religion is the indoctrinative element of it. It's why I stayed in so long. Okay. Religion grabs kids and indoctrinates them. And until that completely stops, and the only way to get that to stop is as they become adults, having them realizing that it's BS, and then they don't teach their kids that. And so it's a generation thing that's slowly going to happen. Look around the world. Okay, you got to get past the Western world. Okay, um, let's put it this way. Um, a lot of my Latin American students, when I was teaching, who came from these countries, very heavily Catholic. Okay, um, as long as we have indoctrinative things like Sunday schools and Bible institutes and Bible colleges and things like that, it takes the generation becoming more and more faithless, and then the next generation isn't as big. Okay, and so there's less and less of that. It's going to take a while to get rid of religion on planet Earth because Latin America is still very Catholic or Pentecostal. You have the Africans who are either Christian, Muslim, or animistic. Okay, and they teach their kids that. You have the Far East. I don't really have a lot of problem most of the time with Buddhists either. They're not trying to convert me. They just present their religion and you take it or leave it. Um, but it's the childhood indoctrination of these kids that keeps religion around. Well, how do you beat that? Well, you have to wait until they're adults and then have them not do it to their children. Okay, it's kind of like it's like breaking a cycle of abuse. It's very much like that, and I think it's going to take a while. That's my personal opinion. There's other people that have different opinion, but I remind atheists in Europe, in the United States, and Australia that while it's growing in our neck of the woods, other places it's not. It because you have the state and religion together, like Islamic countries. Islam and the state are so interlinked, you can't get them apart. And so the indoctrination is nationwide. You have to break that at some point. And it's when the adults give up on their faith and don't teach their kids that. That's when it really happens. So no, in my lifetime, religion is probably still going to exist, probably in my kids as well, maybe my grandkids. Um, I don't know. I think religion is going to be around for a while. The question is, can we get religious people to realize that other people believe differently and that's okay? When I say normalize atheism and deconversion, I want a Christian to look at me and say, yeah, I can understand why somebody would be an atheist and not hold it against me that I am one. Okay. Um, I mean, we were talking about politics earlier, right? One of the things the United States still holds against politicians running for office is if you don't believe in God, you're going to have a harder time running for office. Okay. Secular people still struggle with running for office in the United States because there's this inherent in God we trust thing. And which, boy, I'd really like to see that removed too. But is Trump probably an atheist? I've analyzed Trump a lot, and because he's a salesman and a fraud, it's quite possible he doesn't believe in God. He just likes using it. Okay, he's never going to say that publicly, but he's going to definitely use it if he can. I mean, it's reflective in his recent statements about Christians. It's like, yeah, I'm happy to have your vote. I'm not necessarily going to support what you want done, but I'm happy to have your vote. Yeah. And, the recent poll I saw was Harris was polling 50% with Catholic Americans. So I'm not sure. As far as the morality question, that's something I'm dealing with my series on morality without God. What do you mean by subjective? I think it's a false dichotomy to say morality is purely objective or purely subjective. I think we need to look at it a completely different way. I'm just not sure what that is yet. But I see the problems. And when you talk subjective morality, you do realize there's at least 3 or 4 camps of subjective morality. And so, what do you mean by that? I'd have to know that too. It's a much more complicated question than that. Um, even you can't use divine command theory as objective because it's subject to a God. So, give me an example of a completely objective moral system. I don't see it yet. I don't think any moral system is completely subjective either. There's certain things that they say is objective. So we have that aspect too. But that's a thing I'm exploring in that series. I'm still trying to figure some things out there, but it's not my philosophical moral philosophy is not my wheelhouse. You want to talk about the Bible and theology? That's far more me. Um, I know that stuff. So, all right. Actually, I've kind of hit my hour and a half limit for myself, so I'm going to kind of call it a night. Um, so I just want to thank everybody for being here. I appreciate all of you. You guys have been awesome tonight. I want to thank the mods again for dealing with the situation that we had earlier fairly well. I appreciate you guys, all my mods. Thank you very much. And I'm going to close out like I always do. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe, guys. Broke 5.1K, didn't stay 5K uh, very long. We already have another 100 subscribers, so thank you very much. If you're thinking about subscribing and doing all that, do it. I appreciate it. And there's many ways to support the channel: super chat, super thanks, PayPal link is in the description somewhere, surely. But the biggest thing is membership. So thank you to all my members. Appreciate all of you guys. You guys are awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you all. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. So make sure you're taking all your time, money, and opportunities, as we discussed earlier in this video, and spending them on yourself, the people you love and care for, to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.